Доброго дня, радий вітати всіх в стінах українського кризового.
So, good afternoon. Happy to meet you here in our Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. As always, we are trying to decipher the Russian propaganda. Its totality is one of its essential features, and it's manifested in it goes like to various sectors like sports. One of the parts of the culture as well is infected by it. So, it's pretty typical when it comes to sports and propaganda in sports for many totalitarian regimes, and Russian current modern regime is not something exceptional. Within the last decades, Putin's regime was investing billions of dollars from oil and gas to sports and sports propaganda, and that's how they raise the Russia's image, as they call it, among the countries of the world. And even after the full-scale invasion, when it happened on February 24th, Russia is still trying to rehabilitate, to restore its image for sports, using the idea that sport is beyond politics, yeah? So now we will try to discuss. We've gathered in this wonderful company, first of all, and we're about to talk in details more about how Russia is actually using the hybrid aggression in sports sector. And what adds the relevance to the topic, this recent news that the executive committee of IOC allowed Russians and Belarusians to take part in Olympics in 2024, of course, with some serious limitations, but this is a precedent itself. And I think we should talk about it, like how Ukraine can actually stop this Russian propaganda in sports. So we have Ms. Olga Soloduha with us. She's an MP, head of the Verkhovna Rada subcommittee on high-level sports and sports activity. She's a winner and she's medalist of World Championships, 2012 Olympics, three-time winner of European Championships. So hello, Olga. We also have Alexander Levinsky, president of Sports Journalists Associations, member of AIPS Europe Executive Committee. Greetings, welcome. Leonid Vasilkov, so Olympic journalist, TV and radio host, volunteer. Hello. Vasilkov, yeah. Ilya Shevlyak, president of the Sports Committee of Ukraine, joining us online today. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Glory to Ukraine and glory to heroes. And my colleague, Matt Wickham, he'll join us and he will actually present his paper involving into politics, evolution of Russian artistic gymnastics as a tool of propaganda. I'll be the moderator, Volodymyr Slavyan, head of hybrid impact analysis group, UCMC. Okay, I would love my colleague Matt Wickham to tell us right now about the key results of the study that was carried out. So they took artistic gymnastics, how they use sportsmen, in Russia for their propaganda to be spread, the hate speech and aggression speech to be spread within this propaganda. So we've prepared a presentation, by the way, and we will demonstrate this presentation to you. Yeah, so please. Matt, are you there?
Apologies, I will be speaking in English today. It will be a lot more understandable for all of us. So today I will be really quick because I know time is short today. I will be presenting our analysis of Russian sport, especially sports artistic gymnastics, and why it cannot be considered separate from politics. The title of our recent article was Vaulting into Politics, the Evolution of Russian Gymnastics as a Tool of Political Propaganda. And we aimed to show that all claims of sport beyond politics are just a lie and manipulation used by the Russian Federation and its athletes. We used and focused on three main themes, which was gymnastics in the Soviet Union and the harsh treatment of athletes to create champions. Svetlana Korkina, a Russian gymnastics champion and one of the current heads of the Russian Artistic Gymnastics Federation, and Nikita Nagorny, a Russian gymnast and leader of the Yuna Armia youth movement, and coined for a place on the State Duma in the future, most probably. And just to start off with, competitions in the Soviet gymnastics and also in modern Russia were always a very fierce kind of battle for dominance, a chance to vie for Olympic gold, because this Olympic gold was a rare ticket for a luxury lifestyle in the Soviet Union, a true kind of gold ticket to a better life, but usually one that came with politics. And Svetlana Korkina is a very great example of this. She is one of the first deputy heads of the Central Sport Club Army, the CSKA, which was, by the way, founded by the Ministry of Defense. Its politics is all kind of dictated by the Ministry of Defense of Russia. Another proof that Russian sport cannot be outside politics. And many of the athletes which will now most probably be partaking in the Olympic Games next year do actually originate and come from this club as well. Now, so why was Korkina, why she's an important gymnast to study in our investigation? Well, firstly, her career was kind of revived the competition between Russia and USA. After her being defeated by her American rival, Carly Patterson, she blamed the world and the judges for the unfairness and bias towards Americans and how Russians are always the victim. She said in one of her quotes, I think you've got on the screen there, I knew that my defeat was predetermined even before my first performance, even before she walked out on the stage. She knew this in advance because she is from Russia and not from America. And what we try to prove in our analysis is that this kind of mentality of we are the victims, that I knew I wouldn't win because I am Russian, it's part of the Kremlin's propaganda strategy, a narrative that the whole world is against Russia, that the world is designed to hate Russians. And this narrative is also being seen throughout this war by the Kremlin. So Russia is alone fighting the collective West, we did nothing wrong. This kind of victim mentality, which is not only in sports, but is within kind of deep within the political establishment. A brief history of Korkina to kind of understand a tie between politics, military, and sport is in 2003, she became a member of the United Russia ruling party of Russia. That was a year before she was even competing her last Olympic Games. In 2007, she was elected to the State Duma. In 2018, she was promoted to the rank of colonel in the Russian military. And in March 18, 2022, just 1 month after the full-scale, just under 1 month after the full-scale invasion started, she also spoke at a rally concert in honor of the anniversary of the annexation of Crimea for a world, as she called it, "За мир без нацизма, за Россию, за президента." And so kind of in a short kind of analysis, if you want to know more and kind of dig further into our analysis, it's located on our site. But what I really want to show is that Russian propaganda and Kremlin agents have created this kind of loud scandal to give the impression that the neutral status is a bias and humiliation of Russia, that sports is beyond politics, that this is the fall of kind of how international institutions work, that Russia is being treated unfairly. But this is just a Russian propaganda narrative that the Kremlin will use and they will continue to use after potentially winning medals to undermine the institution in the future, yet still showcasing who these Russian athletes belong to. And after all, whether allowed to compete or not as neutral status, we all know that they are Russians. How? Because most of the time, especially in the Western world, their names, Russian names, cannot be pronounced correctly by the color of their leotards, even if it's a neutral status, by the shouts in the gymnastic arena of "Davai, davai, stoi." Every gymnast knows what these means. They know they're Russians present in the hall. And so allowing Russians to compete under a neutral status is not a punishment for Russia. It's actually the best outcome the Kremlin could have hoped for. And that's, in a nutshell, our analysis. Thank you.
Дякую тобі, Мет.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt. I heard some comparison between Soviet system and modern Russian sports, and one of the most notable, the most significant differences is that Soviet Union used sport to promote the system, but Russia is trying to engage sportsmen at level of, meaning their personalities, use them individually as opinion leaders, as propaganda promoters, to distribute this propaganda and to support this image externally of Russia, So we're coming back. So we're moving from the Soviet Union to modern Russia, and unfortunately, today Russia is still actively hitting the sport infrastructure in particular. 350 approximately of sports objects are destroyed in Ukraine and damaged. But what is most tragic? At the front line, within this war, our sportsmen and sportswomen are dying. Approximately 360 sportsmen gave their lives for Ukraine's freedom and independence, and more than 3,000 of sportsmen currently are in armed forces. And when we speak about the equality within the Olympic movement, Russia, with their constant shellings, with their actions, they are doing impossible damage, inflicting impossible damage, and they, Russians, are imposing huge losses on us. And that's why we can't understand the committee's decision to let Russians take part in the Olympics, the Summer Olympics in Paris, and this is very unclear. This is something we can't understand. And taking into consideration the news, I'd like to ask Ilya Shivlyak, why was this decision made? Because we had the precedent already that Russians and Belarusians were not allowed in general to take part in competitions like in European Games in Poland this year. In 2023, organizers didn't invite Russians and Belarusians, and why they couldn't make a similar decision at the level of Olympics, please. Thank you for invitation. I'm really pleased to join such a wonderful company of experts. When it comes to that issue, I guess it's not to me. It's not a question to me, but you should ask the IOC committee members. If I was responsible, I would definitely provide the arguments for the opposite decision. That, of course, should be there instead of the one we have. As for me, it's a total destruction of values when it comes to sports movement. So the officials of IOC committee, they say that they defend the rights of Russian and Belarusian athletes. But truly, the system, the whole system, the Olympic Charter, which stipulates that there are certain principles of solidarity, principle of equality is mentioned there, principle of integrity, objectivity, transparency, and fairness. Well, it's not there. Because with this decision, they actually all the losses for Ukrainian sport. Nobody speaks of protecting the rights of Ukrainian athletes. These decisions, they are completely destroying the system that was built, that existed for so many years. Sport beyond politics, this whole mantra it's bluffing. Sport has never been beyond the politics because we have so many cases in history. Olympics in Berlin, 1936, yeah? Los Angeles, 1984, Moscow, 1980. Sport, just like any other sector, any part of our life, can be a tool to impact, a tool to promote certain interests of a certain country at international arena. And in this case, IOC, unfortunately, is, with this decision, they created another platform for Russian propaganda to flourish. It doesn't matter how many Russian athletes will take part, 8, 10, like 40, the very fact itself, it's a violation of the key principles. The very fact of giving them this chance is creating another communicative platform to promote Russian propaganda. I think this is an intentional creation of channel this is an intentional decision to create a channel inside the Russia. It's an additional resource. They will still use sport in all other sectors. We do have sanctions, but in sport, look, in sport we actually have no sanctions imposed. It doesn't matter what the flag is, like white or pink or iridescent. It's covered with blood of Ukrainian sportsmen and sportswomen. And you mentioned it quite properly, that there is a price that we are paying, the price of war for us, for Ukrainian sport. Everybody has to know what the cost is, and it would be really good. It would be really good for IOC just to know how many of our athletes died. Those who volunteered, those who went to frontline to defend us, they left their teams. Some boys were even coming back to Ukraine from competitions, from championships to defend us, to take weapons in their hands. The Angels of Sport, the project that was launched last year. We don't even know the stories of those athletes, our athletes who gave their life at the front line. So everybody has to know about this cost that we pay. This month we finally started the Angels of Sport photo exhibition. We've launched it in Europe. I can tell you, for so many, including the representatives of the sport elite, that this is like a discovery. When we opened the exhibition, we had the basketball player there, a star of basketball, of Belgian basketball, European basketball. She said, for me this is a discovery. I never even knew what are the losses. She said, I'm ready to be an ambassador to promote the sanctions against the aggressor. So what still is there left for us? Definitely not the boycotting, but moving forward. Pushing our opinion at the level of international federations and pushing forward and use any opportunities to communicate our opinion, communicate about what is happening, to articulate this, and to promote our interests. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Just a small clarification. So you mentioned the readiness of athletes who find out about the losses for Ukrainian sport from Russia. How horrible is our sacrifice? What is the cost that we pay? At the same time, at the level of international federations, Russians do keep their representation in committees, in various managing bodies. So in which places do we need to advocate this? How can we raise the awareness of more and more people? We have enough of those examples. Ukrainian representatives always continues to talk about it. They create coalition for the early election to be held of the leadership. Our ministry is playing a role. In February 2023, when Poland initiated and they established a governmental coalition with 35 countries in it to promote the interests, and they expressed solidarity with Ukrainian sportsmen, with Ukrainian sports. So everywhere where we can do it, we have to speak of it. Governmental level, individual communication between athletes, federations, the only approach to be that, the single opinion, the single narrative even, the single strategy. How athletes should behave. Do they need to give a hand for welcoming procedure? There should be a protocol, how to behave when you are in the same location with the aggressor's representatives. Thank you, Ilya. Thank you so much. We know that you have certain limitations. we'd like you to stay a little bit longer with us. So we continue with our discussion. So I'd like to ask Olga Solodukha. She's a professional athlete. Speaking of the boycotting initiative to boycott the Olympics, that was mentioned in the context of this decision, IOC decision to let Russians and Belarusians take part in it. So is it actually feasible to take those steps? Or maybe, can Ukraine be supported by other countries that way? Thank you so much. First of all, I'd like to express gratitude for actually raising that important issue for the whole sports community, not just the sports community, for all Ukraine, because this decision made last week by IOC it's appalling. It's horrible. We never expected that. They promised to make some decision in the spring, and when they allowed international federations to take part in Olympics. No, the Olympics, but championships, world and European ones. So I'd like to express my gratitude to the Global Badminton Federation. They said that no, there will be no status in which Russians and Belarusians will do that. An International Federation of Athletics I do represent in Ukraine as well. My gratitude to them, because Sebastian, since the very first days of war, he supported us. He said, under any circumstances, it doesn't matter what the pressure is, he will never bring Russians and Belarusians back. Speaking of the boycott, in my opinion, already seen the case of Olga Harlan, how it works, the boycott, how the community responded, what type of support was not only from Ukrainian fans, but from people all around the world. If you boycott, it should be an active one. And coming to Olympics and demonstrating there how unacceptable it is for Russians and Belarusians to be with all other athletes. And push it harder, do everything that we can. Because we've seen the support. Since the very first day, we led various working groups, talked to athletes. At that moment, I was the head of the Athletes Commission. We talked to Thomas, and now I lead the working group in Parliament on the sanction group. More than 100 people already are under the sanction list, and we talked to so many global parliaments at various levels, from the athletes, like journalists, in parliament, in ministry, National Olympic Committee. We do everything just to keep those athletes away, Russians and Belarusians. We talked to Ukraine's friends joining us, and the boycott, it's just an emergency measure. And if we use all the leverage, if we can't push it without it, but still we have to go to Olympics, this is my opinion, to raise the flag, to show how strong we are, and to keep those athletes away from the arenas. Okay, and you mentioned the work on sanctions list to identify Russian athletes supporting aggression, and I'd like to ask you to tell us in details what the committee is doing. A working group was established, as I know, to counter Russian aggression in sports sector. So why it's so important to impose personal sanctions on Russian athletes, not under federation. In November 2022, we had the idea to establish a working group. So we've merged. We merged the efforts of various state institutions: National Paralympic Committee, Olympic Committee, Presidential Office, Government, Parliament, Ministry of Sports. Ilya Shevlyak joined us, by the way. Yeah, so we with all of them together, just to put pressure on Belarusians and Russians, because when you have individual sanctions, we can give impact, and we can show other countries that blockage of accounts, blockage of visa obtaining, and these athletes should be kept away. The example of France, if we push that to the very end, if at the level of state we managed to do it as it was in Lithuania, Estonia, if at the state level these people will be kept away, those who are the citizens of Russia and Belarus, Nobody will actually even give them the neutral flag. The neutral flag will not allow them to cross the border, like if the France makes the same decision. So the Portal Tribune is actually collecting the evidence. More than 300 athletes already there, even more, in the list who violated all the principles because they are telling that, like, we support the war. We can see how they dressed. We can see in tennis they were showing all the time that Russian Belarusian sport is like a big propaganda, so they did everything for it. So we collect the data. At the level of ministry, I know that there is a huge list because they talk to federation with personal sanctions. Like not the prohibition of visa obtaining, the prohibition of entry to country. At state level, the France has to block that as well. So for them not to enter the country. And as of now, 11 athletes from Russia and Belarus already are qualified for Olympics. So if the precedent emerges like we had with Harlan, with our fencing athlete. So in this case, how can we avoid disqualification? Because this is an international global level. Yeah, and we don't want these provocations Russia to give us a negative impact. If Russian Ukrainian athletes will compete, well, in this situation, how can this be regulated in your opinion? Before actually the competition starts, because we have to handle it somehow. So after Olha Harlan's case, I know that some federations started discussing these, like not touching the hands, like maybe even not fist to fist. So any federation, they have like a list of gestures that they approve after the competition. But Russia is systemically violating the anti-doping guidelines. They still continue banning the World Anti-Doping Agency. And after, at the level of federation, they prohibited, like after the Russian flags were prohibited in symbols, Russian Olympic Committee joined the annexed territories. And after that, Olympic Committee was excluded from the International Olympic Committee. And all those criteria that were, I don't think they didn't manage to comply with any single criteria. Those who were openly supporting the war, how can you allow these people to enter Olympics, even if like there are not so many of them? In social media, we saw that Czech magazine invented this uniform for them. That what should use these athletes on the banners and just showing that these athletes have no right to be in France and any other country of the world. Thank you. And I would like to touch or to draw attention to another more historical aspect. So of how Russia is trying via the sport to promote the inferiority to certain countries. Russia is pushing geopolitically and oppressing. In Russia's and Ukrainian relations, there has always been more politics than sport, let's say. And when Putin came to power, there were certain historical precedents. I guess if we take football, for example, and tension between Russia and Ukraine, Euro 2000 qualification stage, yeah, let's remember that. And the match, remember that match, yeah? But for Ukraine, of course, it was like, at that moment, Putin actually got his face slapped by Ukraine, we can say, because there were just months left by the presidential campaign when Putin actually took Yeltsin's chair directly. So in governmental a governmental meeting. You know, I remember Pustovoitenko and Putin then were visiting the match, and this precedent, they couldn't use it during the pre-electoral campaign as an illustration of domination, because Ukrainian team did their best then. So, one of the illustrative pages of that period of Russia and Ukraine's rivalry in the sports sector was an article, a Russian article titled Russian Sports. You have to hit Ukrainians and save Russia. You know, that horrible title. This publication is a part of the history already. So, Alexander Levinsky, how do you think in Russian environment, was there a demand in Russian world and Russian environment to push this myth forward through the sport, that they are the dominated, they are the oppressor, they are superior? So is it coming from the state, or this is like it's coming from the bottom, or it's coming from the top, let's say? Because you have a lot of experience in presenting those events, so please do share. What is your impression? Yes. As Matt Wickham mentioned in his publication, this memoir, that Russia is invincible, this narrative, and the way they are presenting themselves as the best in sports, it's a Soviet propaganda heritage. We are the strongest. We will tear everything into pieces. But in football, you know, in soccer, let's say, we've showed many times that their claims don't meet the reality. Kyiv Dynamo team won the match with Spartak, but again, in one of the matches we lost as well, but still. Many matches were there when Dynamo was destroying Spartak in the Champions League, but still. The propaganda, definitely we can see, it's a super effective factor for Russia, I mean, and that's why they have the population that they do have. People who actually believe in their president, who is a king to them, whatever, so he's acting like a king. And people who are led, these people are blind, and they perceive what is told by TV, and Putin still finds a way to return to power, being a prime minister. Medvedev now, who was a temporary substitute for Putin actually to get a chance to become president again, so he's sitting with his glass. Okay, so this propaganda is really very, very, very strong, and the propaganda was at the global level with slightly transformed narratives to actually impact the global decision makers, not only in sports, but in external policy, foreign policy. For us, it's so hard to push our narrative. If the world instantly stuck to our claims, you know, we would actually destroy this at initial level, you know, because not instantly they started giving us like air defense and other types of ammo. How many people died before that? So they hesitated. And sitting somewhere far, we've grown these muscles. We live in wartime. It's a part of our life. So we still have the competitions. We still, in 2022, I just want to remind you, in August, the Ukraine Soccer Championship, we revived it, and other championships, and we have competitions with spectators, without these, and they want to bring spectators to soccer matches. But again, somebody didn't know about the war, someone forgot in the world, I mean. Therefore, IOC, well, it's clear that Russia gives its impact, and some powerful sports celebrities are doing this, but IOC is playing with humanism, yeah? Okay, if an athlete is just an athlete, not supporting the war. Why should not he or she get a chance to just like take part? It's nothing bad, especially for people in the world who don't live in a raid alert and shelling context. So our struggle is hard, but nobody mentioned that. I think that we don't need... This is not a failure. Yes, maybe we didn't achieve everything that we wanted, but still a lot we managed to achieve. A lot we managed to get with those actions we had before. Now it's clear that we can see and state that IOC, with these decisions, instead of what they had in March, now it's December, they are step by step doing some unexpected things. But we have to put the pressure. We have to provide the facts. I carefully read all the requirements that IOC is presenting to neutral athletes. These are quite strict. Even Russians, with Belarusians, they think these are discriminatory because they've claimed so many times about it. There is no right for their introduction. They need to have a logo in French, like a neutral international athlete, like monochromatic uniform, and they can't use this George's ribbon. On the nails, you can't put anything like not even the flag, but any symbols related to Russia. So no manicure. And this is something that we have to check carefully. Be careful with it, and we have to put pressure on it, because IOC, if we speak of those 11 qualified athletes, they say that they will still endorse the decision. International federations pick these athletes, and IOC has to endorse. We have cases, the judo, taekwondo, and fencing, where Russians and Belarusians were allowed, and where the participants of competitions were those athletes who belong to army clubs, law enforcement clubs, let's call it, representing the defense and security sector. In judo, approximately 18 people, 2 of them became world champions, and enough of evidence that they took part in these Z gatherings supporting Putin and Smirnova. The fencing athlete who was competing, Harlan, her brother actually, Smirnova's brother, is fighting us Ukrainians in the army. So they ignored all that. And if IOC is such a humane institution, so we have to put more pressure and be careful with it, be attentive to it, and be vigilant. Instead of IOC, we can't make any decision. But we responded very quickly, I guess, to it, and Kuleba, Minister of Foreign Affairs, made a statement, and our government leaders. We had this flash mob of our athletes, where Yaroslava, Mahuchik Andriy Yarmolenko took part, and other athletes who claimed openly that despite Russia is killing Ukrainians every day, killing children, our children. Russian athletes, despite of that, Russian athletes are still allowed to go to Olympics. So this struggle is ongoing till the very last moment. And we've understood that boycott is not a good way out. It's not a solution. We thought of that factor all the time. If it weren't that radical, I think our opinion wouldn't be that strong, because it gives a result. It gives a result. In IOC response, the government's response to IOC's decision, Baltic states are very active, and Scandinavian states responded to a journalist, asked them if they can boycott it. They say so far that it's too early to speak, maybe closer to the beginning of the games, but representatives of governments of these countries mean that definitely we'll see how the IOC will act. If they finalize the qualification of athletes related to support of the war in Ukraine, well, then we can start talking about boycott. But now, of course, we have to fight and we have to push, because this is something that we have. We need to show that we disagree, that we oppose that decision. For us, it's obvious, but for other people, it can be that obvious, maybe in the world, because they have their own problems, if we objectively assess it. If we put ourselves in the shoes of, we have the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So we watch and observe their conflict. We understand that Israelis and Palestinians have different opinions, and we have our own opinion. And someone in the world who is watching us as a third party, they may have their own opinion, something we disagree with, but bringing arguments to those people, there are so many of those people in the world, it's an important task for us. I'd like to add that we have to push the criteria, those which will be unacceptable for Russians. They have publicly to say that their state is doing the wrong thing. Even those 11 qualified athletes will just... We have to do it at all levels. We have to push it at all levels and talk to IOC, maybe signing a declaration or public statement that they are against Putin and they do not support the regime. Well, if you do that, go and compete. Yeah. If we check the statements given by Russian propagandists in sports, they all scream that you can't sign any questionnaires, declarations, because this is a painful hit for Russia. If athletes will say no to aggression publicly, this will contradict the official Kremlin's opinion. At the level of state, they now have the law. If someone claims against the state, they will be prosecuted, so they even had no voice. They block their athletes to keep them from that. But within this discussion, we've already mentioned that for so many times, so many presidents we've had when federations have very superficial approach to monitor if certain athletes supported the aggression of Russia against us. They say, yes, we've checked everything. The person is clear, but then journalists go to social media and they find a post, and this athlete puts likes or puts these modern Russian swastikas, whatever, or symbols. So maybe we can work in the anti-doping, or maybe some institutions should be established which would be professional and fully objective, and somehow to check if Russians are violating that. Maybe a universal tool can be created in the future, because the world is so unstable today. There are so many conflicts. We may have similar conflicts in other countries. Maybe we need to establish an international body which will help us to clarify and clear sports out of propaganda. Eliminate this propaganda and keep sports away from politics and authoritarian regimes. In IOC, there is a body which selects the athletes, but I think this body is not that fully functional. It's not effective. So I guess every representative of federation, those who allow the athletes to enter, they must give a feedback. Because every federation they have a checklist and they understand which athlete is supporting the aggression, which is not. Thank you. I'd like to talk to Leonid Vasilkov. I'd like to ask you, the initiatives of Russia are not very well known in the media space, but Russia will try in 2024 to propagate international sports events within Russian territory, the so-called BRICS games, as they call, the friendship games in September, if I'm not mistaken. 5.5 thousand athletes they've announced with Belarus, from Belarus and Russia. And they, of course, will have athletes from friendly countries, African, Asian countries will take part as well. It relates to cyber sport, the so-called future games or games of future. So, in your opinion, how do you think, can these events be effective to stimulate propaganda of Russian sports? Not only, but certain political narratives as well. in global south countries and western countries will stick to IOC recommendations to stay away from this so-called sports event, but Russia is trying to recreate the Soviet Union experience they had with these friendly championships or whatever. So if this can be an effective tool in current situation, how can we oppose this? Well, in Russia, they do think that this will be super effective for them. In 1984, they had the same friendship games or friendly games in parallel to Olympics in Los Angeles when they boycotted that, and they are trying to copycat it. The Soviet experience. They have two parallel lines. The games that you mentioned, it's for internal market, let's say, for their internal consumers, and we already have these narratives that you'll get the same money as you'll get in the Paris Olympics. Why our stars or athletes and celebrities humiliated by everyone? Why should they go to Paris if they can compete here? These are our favorites. They will make the same money. This is their internal story, yeah? And they will try to push it forward, yeah? For internal market. This is purely for internal market. And another story is what they're trying to push the whole civilized world. I mean, the external layer. That we do not accept the neutral status, we demand to bring us back. And I'm pretty sure they will try to play victims. I just want to remind you that Russian Federation in Olympics, without a flag, without anthem, since Rio they've been doing it. But then they had sanctions for the dirty anti-doping games and stories, yeah. But still, each and every Olympics, every time we have the Olympic Games, they are fighting for that tricolor to be there. Not on athletes, but at least for fans to get these. Winter Olympics 2018. Let's remember that. Till the very last day, IOC was prohibiting even the presence of tricolor symbols, even for fans. And all their diplomatic resources, media, environment, they were putting this pressure for them to allow to have the tricolor. And 1 or 2 days prior to official opening of the Olympics, they were allowed to use the flags. In Korea, millions of these were there. They were hanging everything with their flags, all the locations. They were engaging locals to their activities. And this was the propaganda. This was pressure per se. And we have to understand that this is what they will try to do in Paris in Olympics, because Olympic Games, it's number one, it's the biggest sports event in the world. The whole world will just observe this. So definitely they will try to use all the leverage they can. And how can we impact that? What Ilya mentioned, and Alexander and Olha, our resources all have to be engaged to raise the awareness. What our colleagues are doing with the Tribune portal, approximately 400 cases are published there, proved cases, but thousands of athletes, we are checking them. We are analyzing their social media, their connections. They delete their posts. They are actively concealing and hiding something they've been doing, but screenshots cannot be destroyed, and we actively record everything that was there in previous years. And our task will be to show that to the world, to talk about it, to demonstrate it to the world. Our resources have to work for it. If we take a closer look at this from the standpoint of sports support, with no successful athletes to get the medals, popular, with high level of popularity, is it possible to have effective sports propaganda? Russia was investing in this, a lot of money. They invested in infrastructure, PR of certain athletes, for certain sports types, but due to sanction policy and due to this prolonged war in Ukraine, Russia now has the challenge. They can lose a couple of Olympic cycles, yeah? They actually fall out, they literally fall out of certain cycles. Yes, they may be can get there as neutral athletes, but de facto Russia is eliminated. Harsh, strict limitations, they miss the deadlines for qualification. Representation is minimal, and maybe even at official level there will be a decision made not to take part or not to support the athletes, the neutral status athletes. I mean, the state will not support them. So, in your opinion, if Russia loses a couple of Olympic cycles in the future, Winter Olympics in Milan and next summer in Los Angeles, 2028, considering the global confrontation between the US and Russia, I don't think that Russia in the nearest future will change that. The situation will aggravate and degrade, I'd say. So if Russia loses these cycles, can Russia actually substitute it or replace it with these Spartakiads of Soviet type, or these games or championships? Not the best athletes, let's say, with those showing more mediocre results, those without any records broken. So can Russia support its athletes? Yeah, of course it's possible, but in my personal opinion, this would be a direct way to so-called North Korean model. And I think that many of you do know that in the news, when we heard the Brazil soccer championship, Northern Korea announced in their news that their national team, became the world champion. That they actually, and the whole country was like, they had the national holiday even on that occasion. So maybe Russia will take that scenario, and that people will be so happy for so-called victories. Let them do it. I'll give you a small example of European Games in Krakow this year, where Russian and Belarusian athletes were absent. In a week after the games started, we had a chance to talk to the security of the Olympic Village, where athletes lived. When we asked how many, maybe you had some problems, they said two problems we had. Once, a drunk Polish guy just went to the wrong place accidentally, and the second case when there was a clash between Serbian and Croatian representatives. Rowing, I guess, athletes were. So in the cafeteria, there was a small conflict. And then even the internal security of the committee, they said that if we had Belarusians and Russians, we would have more conflicts. The civilized world, normal Olympic family and community, they would lose nothing if these athletes are missing. Without propaganda, that would be much, much better. They will use something internally. Yeah, they will have these diaries and cases. They've been doing this for years, building this colossus of their superiority, their sports glory to the whole world, and to themselves. They were trying to prove that they're number one. And in Olympic Games, we have this thing, like every big country is establishing its Olympic house, yeah? We have these in France and Canada, like US, China doing this, Russia as well. But in a very different way, sometimes countries have different attitudes. Someone is propagating the culture, meetings with athletes. Russians use this chance at Olympics to prove again to the whole wide world, to drink vodka, play balalaika, and be very loud. Turn on their local songs very loudly, and locals did not even understand what was happening. They turned this into like a very shitty performance. So propaganda will definitely work. Well, if we put them aside from civilized world, if we push them away from Olympics, we'll get fair, objective, great games. There won't be any doping scandals, and that would be good if we push Russians away. Yeah, thank you so much. So we talk about the Olympics as a sports event, a top sports event, because we have a huge global audience and a lot of streaming is there, intense streaming. In non-Olympic years, of course, what is the number one sport? in European continent, in Russia, for Russia and Ukraine, and it's still soccer. And I think we have to stress on that as well. Russia was investing a lot and still investing a lot via sponsorship, millions in contracts with UEFA. Tchaikovsky's music was there in commercials of Gazprom, and they pushed the statement that Russia is giving you heat in winter. Later, when we all found out what was the price for Europe to get this cheap gas from Russia, well, I have a question to Alexander. The UEFA's opinion, we can see some systemic, constant attempts of Russia to bring themselves back to international competitions. Russian clubs are excluded from European cups, but we have a precedent. Like when Russian judges were brought back, I mean, women, and we have these transfers between European clubs still taking place, and we published the article when we analyzed hybrid threats in the end of summer, when we concluded that European clubs paid in total $25 million to Russian clubs. The biggest transfer was Sociedad, 14 million of single payment. Also, other agreements, if we calculate the cost. So, European clubs paid approximately 25 million to Russians. And, in fact, it's not regulated in any way. It's not officially even prohibited. Can UEFA potentially prohibit such operations? Because sanctions are not enough, definitely, to have these financial relations between European clubs and Russians to eliminate those completely. So can Ukraine more actively push UEFA to that? Or we can demand anything, I can say. Objectively, I don't believe that UEFA will do this, because it's like in professional tennis, if we compare. When we speak about business projects, clubs and leagues are business projects, okay? Just like in tennis associations, and professional tennis associations, the global ones where we appealed, where we wanted to exclude Russians and Belarusians, and we claimed, they told us that they are neutral athletes and you can do anything. So we tried to express our opinion, but unfortunately it didn't help. No result was there, and our tennis players have to perform if they want to stay professional tennis players. A very good example, because definitely it's an example of bloody money paid to Spanish club, but Spanish are not, they don't have this clear attitude to the events that we have. Roman Zuzula, our football player, he is still performing in Spain, and he was called a Nazi fascist for his support expressed to Ukrainian military before the full-scale invasion. So this is what I'm talking about. People live somewhere in the world, in Spain, in Portugal. They don't even care about those problems that we have. So yes, we have to talk about it, definitely. And to my direct question, at a Congress of International National Press Associations, when I asked one of my colleagues, what is the difference between Russia and Belarus? Belarus is supporting the aggression. Why do you allow them? He didn't give me an answer. Some statements, vague statements like, it's not about giving permission, we want these football to develop and all that crap, The Russians are still there. Yes, they put us in different, let's say, qualification tournaments, but if we and Belarusians will go to final, well, in the context of final game, well, we still can face each other. In European Championship, we won't have it, but we have various junior tournaments where we can actually get that. So a problem is still there. Russian football players are still there in the clubs and nobody is pushing them out. They said these are neutral athletes. IOC has loads of those cases, like tennis, football. Remember Bach giving us this tennis case, saying that, okay, the story, do you remember that we had in 2022? In fact, Bach used this case just to endorse the decision that we have now. So it's clear that all this thing is quite hard. It's multi-layered, multi-dimensional when we speak of the sports sector. It's hard to eliminate and push them away completely. It's intertwined with politics. Russia is isolated already in many places. Yes, they can have their own championships. Let them do that. If they've, I really want them to put a big concrete wall on their border. I want them to keep all their missiles inside as well, and for them to not to launch those drones to any other country. Yes, this is a problem. Russians are still very aggressive in sports. Also, let us speak of the boxing, Amateurs Boxing Federation. Kremlov is leading it, and he gave a statement that this is not the IOC's business to qualify, but International Boxing Federation has to do it. We will do it ourselves. We will define those who will go to Olympics. I think that maybe there will be no boxing at all, but this is a problem still, because we've already established an alternative like boxing federation, but still it has no chance to launch a selection. Therefore, there are problems, and Russians are very aggressive. The propaganda is harsh, so we definitely have to respond and to counter that, try to counter that, and I think that Ukrainian celebrities, they can give their word. Because if we analyze the actions of Bach and IOC, we can clearly see that advantage is given to financial factors. Saudi Arabia, he visited Saudi Arabia, and like he once said that we can't speak of the Olympics in Saudi Arabia because there's a lot of injustice, inequality between men and women. Now he says, look, now he says that they have a big progress. This is like, maybe they even will take Saudi Arabia as a candidate for Olympics, you know, but I don't know, these bright examples, I don't know if they actually ensure the level of equality for men and women. In Saudi Arabia, there's so many human rights violations as well, but maybe even the World Championship, as already discussed, can take place there. So, what we have on the planet, it's not the first time when money rules and money is prevailing over other factors quite often. So, it's hard to fight that without big money. We have to fight with our words because we do believe in justice and in humanism and in honesty. And this is a hard struggle. And we have to keep the struggle because IOC was established for people to settle disputes like peacefully. For countries to settle disputes peacefully, but not always it happens like that. So in 1936, that was in Nazi Germany already that held the games, and then World War II, there was no Olympics, but in 1948 we had it, and Germans and Japanese were prohibited to take part. They were recognized as aggressors of WW2, and our war is not called WW3, but some political experts already are giving this title. In 1952, Germans and Japanese were also eliminated in Soviet Union had the chance back then, but they were observers. We've been talking about this. The politics in sports, despite this humane principle and the wish to get rid of it, but the more sport is developing, the more of the politics is there, because it's about introducing the country, it's the image of the country. And we know that politicians, they don't miss that. For them, it's a place where they can flourish. The state leaders want to use that factor. It's always there. It has been there. We can see that some politicians can be called decent people who recognize their heroes, who support sports, but are not putting politics in that. They don't, they stick to rules. But Putin and Lukashenko, for example, they use these achievements to say, this is the country because we are the strongest and we have to win all the time. It can't happen otherwise. If someone like wants to enter the NATO, we have to hit instantly. When some boxer tried to explain it to Usyk, base of sport. There is a project, by the way. We mentioned that that project is collecting those cases. Like when in personal accounts they give statements and okay, so how they use it as an excuse for their actions. If one boxer is approaching the other, it's like you trying to enter the NATO, that's why we're being that proactive, so all these stupid excuses are there. But it's pretty different. It's an attack, it's not about defense. And it's a terrorist act. And we can use all the worst wars, even the genocide, to describe that. So we can't stop the struggle. We have to do it till we finally get the victory. So just to conclude, I can say that Russia is not planning to step away. They are still trying to push via its representatives in international federations and trying to push the propaganda, the key messages of propaganda. And our discussion confirms that. Russia is trying to use the statement of so-called whataboutism, like what about others? Why we are punished, why we're being punished, and the US had their Middle Eastern operations and also Israeli-Palestinian tension. They're trying to put that as excuse why Israeli athletes are not excluded. So it's a serious argument which should not be underestimated, because it works not only for Russian audience, but it's used for Middle Eastern countries, and there is quite an active response. Other areas, it touches on other areas. And this big message, the attempt to present themselves as victims, that West is very biased towards us, as they usually say, and this message is effectively used in those countries who are neutral, who are ignorant, or maybe very superficial when it comes to the war in Ukraine, or maybe the societies are indifferent when it comes to Ukraine's situation, the sufferings of Ukrainian people. Just to conclude, I'd like you to mention, what is your vision? What is your opinion? Apart from these messages, what Russia can use within its propaganda? Maybe we're doing enough as a state, but your opinion. How can Ukrainian society engage in this? In which sectors of information policy should we be more active to prevent these narratives? Are we doing enough? Still, we have some limited resource. Maybe this is the maximum that we can do. It's a question to everyone. Just a couple of statements from each. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to add that we have to forget the narrative sports beyond politics. Sports is directly about politics. Olympics, it's about all big countries are showing off, showing their achievements, their capacity at the games, and the anthem, the flag, and that's why Russians are offended, insulted that hard. That's why they're whining. They want their flag to be there. I remember when it was in media, when Russians said that sponsors left us, we have nothing to wear. As Yulia Levchenko said very properly, she said, you have nothing to wear, we have nowhere to live because you destroy our homes, you destroy our gymnasiums, you rape us, you kill us, you destroy everything you can. And in this context, I'd say that still the media component, it's important. We have to speak out loudly. Our top athletes, our celebrities and politicians to speak everywhere that Russia is aggressor. Belarus is aggressor, they are murderers, and they can't be present in world sports. In civilized countries, they should not stay there. If they want to find some loyal countries and go to some competitions where they are supported, Saudi Arabia, let them stay there, maybe. We've seen Khanty-Mansiysk, the Olympic Games, as they offer it, the prototype. And, you know, the competition, making monuments out of the cow's shit, maybe that's what they can do. That's their level. We have to work with the promotion of our narratives and our media component. Thank you for presenting this important topic. What you mentioned in the end, like what we can do, I think it relates not only to sport. Everything we can do is let's learn our history. Let's respect our language, our songs, our content, sports content, cultural content, cinematography, music, and let us have some internal strength to withstand Russian contact that we are poured with. You know, we understand that Russian propaganda will still be there and they will try to push us. They'll try to destroy our faith in ourselves. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. Let us not fall into despair. We have to be confident. Ukrainians are the best, okay? Let us have faith in us and in armed forces. When we finally get the victory in the military front line, we'll have the victory everywhere. In every sector in the whole world, the whole civilized world will support us, and it's going to be beautiful. And I do believe it will be like that. Leonid and Olga mentioned it really, really well. I can just support what they said. We don't have a right to let ourselves be weak, because our struggle is ongoing. It will finish only when we get the victory or dream of it. Yes, we are tired. We all are. It's a colossal fatigue. Europeans are whining that they are tired of us, but we are holding the shield. Yeah, and our defenders are holding the shield, and but they stand strong and they give us a chance here to do our peaceful things. But we are at war. Okay, so we have to be strong. We have to be resilient. We have to use all methods to raise the world's awareness for Ukrainian word to be heard in the world, and Ukrainian opinion and narrative to be heard, to send evidence everywhere that Russians support the aggression, just like Belarusians. For those institutions mentioning they had a 3-level inspection, but they still allow Russian judo athletes from army clubs to go. We should not get it there. We will relax. No, we won't relax when we get the victory, because we will restore the country. Okay, let's stay strong. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes. Thank you so much for warm and inspiring words. I think that with this positive note, we'll finalize this discussion. I can just mention that Russian propaganda in sports. This topic will still be presented in our publications, and the synergy with expert community, with journalists, with athletes, with people representing sports in state authorities, it's important. And I think that together we will manage to produce effective counteracting measures. I do hope that this is not definitely like the last discussion. We'll talk about it more in future. Thank you so much for participation. I'm grateful to the audience, and stay with us.